Morning. Good morning to everyone filing in here. Get started in just a couple minutes. If you have any questions during the presentation, you can write them in the chat if you're worried about forgetting them. Or there'll be plenty of time at the end to ask questions if you'd like. We're expecting about 15 or so people, so we'll just give them a minute to file in here. And yeah.
Feel like we should be saying hello. Hi. How you doing, Dave? Hi. Good morning.
Okay.
How's everybody doing this morning?
Good morning.
Morning.
How you doing?
Doing well. How about yourself? Yeah, it's nice to see you all this morning. We'll see who else joins us
I'm coming. Tell
during
him.
the presentation. It's going to be recorded so we can share it out afterwards. It is recording. Yeah, so great to have you join us for a presentation about mammals this morning. Does anybody have any questions before I start my presentation? Okay, I will mute everyone during the presentation, just to avoid interruptions and ensure a good experience for everyone. If you do have questions, you can put them in the chat or ask them afterwards, plenty of time after. I said the presentation would be about half an hour, so I'll try to keep it to about half an hour. And then 15 or so minutes for questions. I can go longer if you have more questions, not a problem at all. And yeah, I hope you find it enjoyable, and hopefully it'll be motivating for all of us to get out there and do more land stewardship, because all of these animals are found on our properties. So and just a quick word about stewardship. If you didn't know, I've been here for about 3 years, and volunteers have been the most critical part of our land stewardship for forever at Zenith Conservation Land Trust, but especially during my experience here as well. So I hope that we can restart doing some volunteer land stewardship during the month of March. So that should be fun, and it'll give us a chance to get jump started on some of the projects that we have going on. So probably more details to come on that. In the meantime, I hope you enjoy the presentation. I'm just going to share my screen here. Okay, so today we're talking about mammals of Cape Cod, which is a topic that I find interesting, obviously. Here, our lead slide is a photo of Shiverick Pond, which is on a privately conserved property in East Dennis. Absolutely beautiful area. Unfortunately, no public access. So, mammals, yeah. Mammals have been around for millions and millions of years. And so I thought we would start with some of the more technical scientific information. So Mammalia is a class of animals. Mammalians are vertebrates, obviously. They have a backbone. And they tend to be warm-blooded, although there are some more ancient mammals that are not completely warm-blooded. So those are the platypus and the echidna, and we don't have those here, so we're not going to talk about those today. There are two different clades of mammals that are found in North America. We do have a marsupial, and we have what we call placental mammals, although marsupials, they do have placenta for their young, but they are born not fully developed, and so they need to spend some time developing inside a pouch from the mother. There are over 6,300 described mammalian species in the world. Most of those are what we call placental mammalian species. And most of the marsupials are found in South America and Oceania, which is the region of Australia, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea. So historically, going back thousands of years, we had the megafauna present in New England, which would have been kind of fun to see. Of course, you know, probably during that period of time, Cape Cod did not really exist in the way that it does now, because it's a post-glacial landform. And at any rate, throughout New England, we did have mastodon, woolly mammoth, ground sloth, the short-faced bear, lions, all kinds of stuff. And then most of those went extinct around 11,000 years ago during a period of time they called the Younger Dryas, which is a climatic event, which was associated with the advance of ice sheets again after a period of melting. So, you know, you might have learned many years ago that people were responsible for the extinction of these animals, and more recent thoughts about that have been that it was really climate related. And then we have more recent extinctions and extirpations in our areas. So going back to the pre-colonial era, all these animals you see here were present in Massachusetts. Some have not made their way back and probably never will. It's believed that the eastern elk is extinct, although supposedly the elk in Tennessee, there's elk in the Smoky Mountains that have been reintroduced. They have some eastern elk genes, I guess, and we're not going to get too much into that. But we did have elk in Massachusetts. We had mountain lions, wolves. We had a mammal called the sea mink, which is extinct. It may have been a subspecies of mink, but most commonly it's described as a separate species really found around the Gulf of Maine. And it was an aquatic mink, which is in the weasel family. So that's what a mink looks like now. They are often found around water. This is their common mink. And it was a larger animal, the sea mink. Ate fish, shellfish primarily. And skeletons have been found in shell middens. It was hunted to extinction for its furs. As we think about the historical use of mammals in Massachusetts, there were a lot of consumptive uses of animals before the Industrial Revolution. And it was a big part of our economy. As I mentioned, we have one species of marsupial, the Virginia opossum. And then we have all these other orders of mammals found in our area. Rodents, rabbits, shrews and moles, bats. And I realize that this may be covering that up for you. What we call the carnivores, even-toed hoofed ungulates and cetaceans or whales. So a little more ecological theory here before we kind of dive into our mammals. I'm not going to talk too much about this other than to say that every animal has its own niche, and animals are adapted to their environment, and they adapt in all different ways. So what we call our selected organisms don't live very long. They produce many young, and that is their reproductive strategy. And minimal parental care and investment, often a very short gestation time. So a classic example would be mice. And then we have what we call K-selected organisms, which are a very long gestation period, high parental investment. So things like whales and humans would be considered to be K-selected. All right, let's start with our friend, the opossum. Never really present in our area until the 19th century, or 20th century, excuse me. I don't know at what point in time it first became present in southern New England, but maybe 50 years ago or thereabouts. Seems particularly well adapted to suburbanization, so that's probably a reason for its range expansion. This is an animal that's found down into Latin America. And again, there are many more marsupials present in South America. This is our only possum that we have here. They eat thousands and thousands of ticks. So they're very good at controlling the tick population, which we love. They're omnivores. And so they're eating all kinds of different prey items. They're opportunistic, of course. They'll eat trash if it's left unsecured. They have a great many teeth, which if you've ever run into one and it snarled at you, you'd see all those teeth and probably be scared, as I have done when I've run into them. But they're no danger to people. They are very resistant to rabies. They have a low body temperature, which it's so low that the rabies virus finds a hard time reproducing inside their body. So pretty interesting adaptation for that. They don't live very long at all. They live maybe a couple years. and often found dead on the road because they move very slowly. Had a very sad experience a couple of years ago driving at night. Of course, they're nocturnal, and there was one that had been hit and was dying in the road, and it was awful. But I managed to get it on a towel and move it across the road, and it was too late. It was about 11 o'clock at night, too late for me to get it anywhere for any kind of help. But so please be careful when you're driving at night, looking out for these slow-footed animals. Here's an opossum at Toby Woodlands. You can see it in the background over here. There's another one that we captured on one of our properties. This is our property on Cove Road. And we've had kind of mixed results with their wildlife cameras over the past couple of years. But we have gotten some great photos. So that'll be a big part of this presentation. Oh, here's another interesting animal that I wanted to share with you. We have two species of flying squirrels in New England, and the northern flying squirrel is much rarer than the southern. Here we have the southern. They're pretty common. It's one of 3 species of squirrels that we have here. Of course, we have gray squirrels and red squirrels as well. If you see a black squirrel, that's a melanistic type of gray squirrel, most frequently. Not a separate species, it's just a genetic variation. These squirrels are pretty cool. They nest in tree cavities. They have 2 litters a year of a few young at a time. This is what we would call more of an R-selected organism because they have a lot of young each year. They have a very good eyesight. You see those huge eyes on the animal here. They're pretty small, and they're kind of cute. You find them in bird nest boxes sometimes, hanging out in there. We try not to evict them when we find them there. So I just want to play a little bit of this video from David Attenborough. You may have seen this before. It's on YouTube. This is from Planet Earth. So as you can see, they have incredible gliding abilities. They're not flying, but they have a flap of skin between their feet, which is attaches at the ankle, and they stretch it out, and they're able to glide up to several hundred feet in between trees, and they're foraging on nuts, and also a really good way to escape predators. Let's see here. Just trying to advance the slide here. Oops, excuse me. Okay. Maybe an animal that you find unpleasant, but it's certainly increasingly present in our area from all anecdotal information that's out there. This is a rat that I found on our Swan River Road overlook property. It's dead. May have died of natural causes, not really sure. Maybe a cat killed it. Who knows? There's no visible tissue damage here, so don't really know. This is another classically R-selected organism. They have tons of babies a year. They live in large colonies, of course. They're highly social. They have pretty interesting social lives. They're able to recognize another rat as an individual. So there's complex hierarchy in between the animals. Interestingly enough, if you think about rats in terms of the millions of lives that are saved every year from doing medical testing on them, perhaps it balances out all the other problems that they have caused over the centuries. They've particularly been a problem on islands, and especially with ground nesting birds, because they're voracious predators of eggs. And so they've wiped out seabird colonies on islands where they've invaded. There are several islands in the South Atlantic with large penguin colonies where there's been efforts over the last several decades to eradicate the rat populations. And so the way that they've done that is with toxic bait. I would urge all of us to think twice about using rodenticide in and around your home. However, because as you may have seen from some of the wildlife rehabilitation organizations around here, Wildcare is one of them, raptors and owls are frequently poisoned by consuming poisoned prey. So a rat or a mouse that has eaten rodenticide may not die right away, and so it may just be slowed. And then, a red-tailed hawk might think that's an easy meal. When that red-tailed hawk ingests that mouse, it's going to cause internal bleeding for the red-tailed hawk, and they actually can die, and it's a really horrible way to die. So the less we can use these chemicals around our home, the safer our wildlife will be. Snap traps are very effective at controlling rodents if you're not absolutely overrun with them. So, all right, here's an animal that is maybe little known for some of you. It's our only native rabbit, the New England Cottontail. The other species of rabbit that we have here is the Eastern Cottontail. And the Eastern Cottontail was actually introduced in the 1800s. So they're not native to New England at all. Those are the rabbits that you see eating grass in your lawn, Eastern Cottontails. The New England Cottontail was formerly found all throughout New England. It's a rabbit that likes wooded areas. They especially like really shrubby areas, dense cover. They're found often around wetlands, so they really like shrub swamp wetlands. It's believed that they're found in Dennis, but they're very rare. They're a species of greatest conservation need in Massachusetts, which is a designation that is produced as part of the state's wildlife action plan by Mass Wildlife. At this time, they're not protected by any state or federal laws. There's a lot of restoration work underway to create new habitat for New England Cottontail. And one of the ways that land trusts and the state are doing that is by doing prescribed burns in large areas of pine barrens to create new growth in new areas for New England Cottontail. What happens over time is in these pine barrens, when there's too much of a closed canopy situation, some of the understory begins to be less robust, and it supports fewer rabbits. They have less cover. I wrote here that they're an umbrella species. What that means is by protecting New England Cottontails, we actually protect a lot of other species that depend upon these habitats, which are often called early successional habitats. So those are areas of young forests, areas of shrubs. A good example of this is if you go to Coles Pond Bog, you're going to see some nice early successional habitat there, or at Crow's Pasture as well. And it's very difficult to differentiate the two species. It's really differentiated by habitat. However, most New England Cottontails have this black spot on their head here, and Eastern Cottontails do not. So, and if you see a rabbit in your yard, it's almost certainly, unless your house is surrounded by shrubs, it's almost certainly an Eastern Cottontail. Okay, I wanted to spend a little time talking about shrews because they're very interesting animals, and they're not animals that we encounter very often, but they're very common. Here's one of the species that we have in our area. It's called the masked shrew. So shrews, they're not rodents. They have their own order. They're not closely related to rodents at all. They're related to moles. They're omnivores. They are often underground much of the time, which is why we don't see them. They're very short-lived. They only live a year or two. Most shrews don't survive their second winter. Here we see a northern short-tailed shrew. And what is so interesting about this animal is it produces venom. It's one of very few mammals that are venomous, and the venom that they produce stuns their prey. Mostly what they're eating is salamanders and insects. They will also eat rodents. They're pretty voracious predators. They have sharp teeth. They need to eat constantly to maintain their very, very high metabolisms. And you can see that here with their heartbeat rate, which is pretty insanely fast. I don't run into them very often alive. Most often when I find them, I see them in the trail dead. And presumably most of the time they've died of natural causes. This one here is not a photo that I've taken, but it also looks like this one is deceased. All right. Sadly, this species used to be a lot more common around here. It's the little brown bat, cute little guy. The only flying mammals, of course, bats. We have many bat species in our area. But most of those are increasingly less common because of the white nose syndrome, which is an invasive fungus. And so that started to have this problem about 10 years ago. And it's thought that the fungus was introduced by splunking. So there are people, who explore caves for exploration reasons as a hobby. And I guess this fungus probably came from Europe, and It was introduced here, and the bats here had no natural defenses to it. It grows on them in high humidity situations like in a cave. And it's really a problem for them while they're trying to hibernate, because they will wake up to try to remove the fungus from their faces. And basically they could wind up starving to death because there's not insect prey in the winter for them to eat. So seeing bats active in the winter is not something that you should be expecting to see. They're true hibernators. These guys, maybe some of you like me have had bats in your attic at some point in time. It very well could have been this species. They have large maternal colonies, and they'll hang out in attics in the summertime when they're giving birth to their young. They use echolocation to locate their prey. They eat tons of mosquitoes, so they're very important for keeping the mosquito population down. And one good place to look for bats, I think, is at Johnny Kelly Park around dusk. I've often seen bats there. I don't know what species I'm looking at, but they like to forage over open areas where, and especially in places where, insects might be attracted by lights, like at Johnny Kelly, lights at night. All right, moving on to the weasels. Whoops, excuse me here. We've got, oh dear, several species of weasel in our area. I'm just trying to move this. And you can see a weasel over here. This was at Toby Woodlands. And we believe this is probably a long-tailed weasel, but not really sure. The short-tailed weasel is more rare in our area, whereas the long-tailed weasel is more common. Contrary to their names, they're both relatively similar tail length. There's some overlap there. And then we also have river otters and fishers, which have returned in some numbers. I know they've been seen at Indian lands. Some folks have had experiences with fishers there. They're probably found on any large forested parcels around town. And they seem to be adapting pretty well to suburban living as well. This is a really adorable video of the ermine, aka the short-tailed weasel, aka the stoat. See, their coat gradually changes over the winter time. So they have a white coat in the winter to blend in with the snow. This video was filmed in England, where they also have stoats, as they call them there. So here's our short-tailed weasel. According to the state, they are less common in southeastern Massachusetts, but we suspect they might be around here, as I indicated with that photo. They're arboreal animals, so they love to be up in trees. They use chipmunk dens, for pursuing chipmunks and also for resting, hiding from predators. Like to hang out in stone walls, like you just saw. They produce musk from their anal scent glands to mark their territories. This is an animal that's found all around the world. That's what circumpolar distribution means. all around the poles, all throughout the world. Really a cool animal. The closely related Longtail Weasel here, this is a dead long-tailed weasel that I found at Coles Pond Bog, and it wasn't apparent what had killed it. And the way that I determined that this one was a long-tailed weasel is because of the length. It was a pretty big animal. It was 19 inches long from the head to the tail. So that would be too big for it to be a short-tailed weasel. They're found all throughout North America. They do turn white in the winter. Some do and some don't. You know, these are voracious predators, just like short-tailed weasels, feeding on birds' eggs, small mammals, rabbits. They'll take down animals larger than themselves. So they're quite good at taking down those animals. All right, next up is our friend, the eastern raccoon. Different subspecies of raccoon are found throughout the continent. This is an eastern raccoon that we spotted at Coles Pond Bog. They're very curious and intelligent animals, and they're highly adaptable to urban and suburban living. They're opportunistic, you know, they feed on trash, obviously. There have been studies in the lab of raccoons learning to use tools to some limited extent. So with those hands that they have, they may be able to use tools to some limited degree, which indicates their intelligence. They use their hands to, you know, crack open shellfish. You often see raccoons in the salt marsh a lot where they're feeding on shellfish. It's one of their preferred prey items around here. I had an interesting experience with a raccoon in Harwich, where we were working on an osprey pole, and I climbed to the top of the osprey pole while I was working on it. This was in the wintertime when no ospreys were there. And I get to the top of this 20-foot pole and I hear some rustling. And all of a sudden, this huge 20-pound raccoon popped up and it leaped from the top of the pole down to the marsh and just waddled away. It was wild, and it really scared the daylights out of me. But I think the raccoon was even more scared. There's another raccoon that we found at Cove Road. Looks like a big, healthy animal. And, you know, although they do contract rabies, and they're one of the primary carriers of rabies, and they can cause problems with trash, they're an important animal for the ecosystem. You know, they're prey for larger animals, and because they're omnivores, they're feeding on all kinds of different items all throughout the year, from fruit to nuts to carrion, and on and on. We're going to end here with our friend, the eastern coyote. There's a coyote urinating at Coles Pond Bog. Nice, healthy animal. Got lots of photos at the end here. They're another recent introduction, and they came here on their own. They first occurred in southern New England in 1957, so they weren't here before then. They probably came east because although they don't have quite the same niche as the wolf, wolves were hunted to extirpation throughout most of the eastern United States. There were bounties on wolves, and you know, we encouraged people for years to kill them. And as wolves were gone from the ecosystem, the coyotes started moving further east. They've also adapted really well to suburbanization. They're finding more food in terms of rodents and rabbits, which also do well in suburban ecosystems. Their genetic makeup includes some wolf genes. They've interbred. It's been demonstrated that they've interbred with wolves up in Canada. So the coyotes in our area can have up to 20% wolf genes and possibly 10% domestic dog genes. They seem to exclude red foxes. Red foxes don't do well in coyote territories. And maybe the reason why we're seeing fewer foxes around over the last few decades, we know that foxes also have a problem with mange, which is a disease that causes hair loss in the animal. We're finding over time that coyotes sometimes do exhibit pack behavior. I'm going to show you a cool photo coming up. But more commonly, they hunt in pairs. They can also be solitary, especially young males. So they strike out on their own, and they're looking to establish their own territories. Attacks are pretty rare. I'll share this link with you after the presentation. You can take a look at it on your own. It's pretty easy for the most part to avoid conflict with coyotes. What are most at risk are your pets. If they're out in the yard and you're not keeping an eye on them, your dog or your cat, they could easily fall victim to a coyote. Even during the day, it's not unusual to see coyotes during the day. It doesn't mean that they're rabid. They're active both day and night, like most other animals in the dog family. Here's a photo that I just saw the other day on Facebook. It's a group of, I believe, 8 coyotes that were seen in a yard, all hunting together in Harwich. Really cool. This was taken last week around Paddocks Pond. They had just killed a squirrel, apparently. And during this time of year, they are mating, and when the young are born, that's the period of time when coyotes might be most aggressive. So if you see a coyote exhibiting aggressive behavior in the next few months, they could be guarding a litter of pups, and you want to keep your dog and yourself away from that area as much as possible. Here we had a doe and a fawn that were hanging out at Coles Pond Bog. Beautiful little fawn here. This is from a couple summers ago. So this photo was taken a few days prior to this next photo. And here we see 2 coyotes on the hunt. And I wonder what they're looking for. There they go, chasing. Notice the timestamp on the bottom, 6:15 a.m. 6:15 a.m. Just during that same minute, you see this doe sprinting by. Coyote has circled around, back around apparently again. And there, the deer goes, actually, this is a different day, but there's our fawn again racing by. So the coyotes weren't successful on this particular hunt on June 12th. But we do know that they're frequent predators on fawns. They can take down, two coyotes can take down an adult deer together. So they do prey on deer. And we don't know what happened with that fawn, but some very interesting interactions that we saw on our camera there. And finally, here's a photo of a coyote howling at the full moon at our Cove Road property. And this is probably a young animal here. Okay, I could probably go on and on and on, but in the interest of time and attention, I won't. So I'm just gonna stop sharing here. I will share these books with you as well. I recommend all 3 of these books. There are probably better field guides than the Peterson's Field Guide to Mammals, but it's one of the most common ones that you see around. So I'm going to allow you to unmute yourselves at this point, and I'm happy to take questions.
A couple of stories, maybe.
Sure.
Like with
You
the-
can-
Oh,
you
sorry,
can
go
share a
ahead.
story if you like.
No, Sam, yeah, when you're talking about, well, we had a friendly possum last year that used to come around, and I really
Oh,
like
yeah?
that because I know that yeah, I know that it would eat anything and keep all the little critters away since we feed a lot of birds and everything, so that was good. But we have a fish pond, and we used to have the koi in there, big koi, 10 to 12,
Mhm.
and an otter. We know an otter had to be the one to get in there. We never saw it. But I had it so tightly at night. I would put a big fencing over it with a netting, and there was only a hole about the size of 6 inches near where the waterfall would come down. I had big rocks on the side so it could never be disturbed and moved. Sure enough, I come out and I had like 10 of them in there. I pull up that for the day because nothing would bother it during the day. I'd pull it up and there was like 7 gone. And it's like
Mm.
no trace of anything around. And I knew the next day from this experience before that once they know there's fish in there, they're going to keep coming back till they finish them off. So sure enough, I put my, covering down for that night, came back, the others were gone the next day, nothing around. So that we figured the only thing that would go in water that could stay underwater with a hole this small and not be disturbed, anywhere on the pond would have to be an otter. I mean, there's nothing else that could have gotten in there that would have stayed underwater. So we have to assume that that's what it was, And from that
Could have
point,
been
no
a
more fish.
Could have been a coyote too. Coyotes will eat fish.
Oh, I can't hear. Oh, sorry. Wait a minute. I got my speaker down. Sorry about
No,
that.
it's okay. I was just saying, perhaps it could have been a coyote.
Well, no, because the thing wasn't disturbed at all. Like I had what they put, when they put a stabilized cement and they have those 4x8 pieces of metal with the like 4-inch squares in there, whatever
Oh,
they
yeah.
call that. And then I put like a regular thick netting around it and I laid it right on top of the pond. Like I said, with 2 huge rocks on each side every night. So the only area that was big enough for anything to get in was where the water fell down because we have the waterfall thing. And
Oh, okay,
yeah, so nothing was disturbed at all. So we have to assume that it was probably an otter, since that's one of the only things that will go, or I don't know about a weasel who would stay underwater that long, but I would think, an otter would stay underwater that long.
Yeah, I don't know how long they could stay underwater for, but probably several minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it was just so I said after that was like the 3rd year after that, I said no more fish because we know they'll get eaten every fall,
Yeah. Yeah, you can only guard against so many things. You try to guard against the herons, and then you wind up with the otter in your fish pond.
And we had a flying squirrel,
Yep. Yeah. Cool animals.
Yeah.
What has everyone else been seeing on their property lately or over the years?
I have one question about rabbits. We had a period where these rabbits would just go under our back porch and die. So what's killing the rabbits and why are they crawling under my back porch to die? It was gross.
Yeah. That's interesting. They probably were sick. They probably went there to die. There's all kinds of diseases that can affect rabbits.
Okay, so probably
there's one is myxomatosis, leptospirosis is another one that affects rabbits. And I assume they crawled under there like many animals do when they're about to die. So
it's
it could be
actually it was a funny story. Actually, it was the day we were buying the house. And we went to the final inspection and there was this horrible stench. And we're like, what the heck is this? And we finally had a handyman come and he found carcasses under the porch. And then it happened later too, another year later, it happened again. So finally we sealed off the bottom. So that didn't happen again, but it was disgusting.
Yeah, another thing that could be happening is one of your neighbors had put out rodenticide and the rabbits could be eating it.
Ah, okay.
Because they'll consume the bait as well, and it will also kill them. So it could be poison.
Okay.
Also.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Some of the most common rodenticides that we have in the US are actually banned in a lot of other countries, just to, just as evidence that we know that these things are very toxic and harmful to the environment. That's, of course, true about a number of other chemicals that we commonly use here. So best to just exert some care and caution, if you really do have an infestation problem on your property, something you might think about. I find that pest control companies quite frequently will resort to poison even if you don't have a problem. So it's just best to exert some caution when using those, because we do know that it has a really harmful effect on especially raptors and owls and rabbits.
I'm going to say thank you. It was fun.
Yeah, thank you, Donna.
Have a good February, March, whatever.
Yeah, we'll see you when you come back.
Yeah. See ya. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Any other questions and things folks would like to share with us today?
If we see an injured animal, what organization do we call?
Yeah, so you can call Dennis Natural Resources, but most often what they're going to do is call either Wild Care in Eastham, or they're going to call the New England Wildlife Rehabilitation Center in Comaquid in Barnstable. So both those organizations do a great job at rehabbing injured animals. They're both nonprofits, so you might think about supporting them with your charitable giving. They're great organizations. Wild Care does more with birds, and the center in Barnstable, they do more with mammals. So they do even work on large mammals. I'm not sure about coyotes and deer, but they have raccoons and stuff like that there. And the best thing to do is to use your judgment. If an animal is in the road and it's in peril and it's clearly injured, you might think about moving it. Many mammals do carry rabies, so you might think about that as you are dealing with them. Protect yourself appropriately. Of course, don't put yourself at risk. In terms of baby squirrels and rabbits and things like that, if just because they're on the ground alone doesn't mean that you necessarily need to act right away. Oftentimes the mother knows where they are, or there could be something else going on. So you might want to ask the advice of a wildlife professional before you handle any animal, unless the animal is in dire peril. Yep. So their numbers are on the internet. I can probably find that information and share it with you as well.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome, Dave. Yeah. So we look forward to getting out and doing some work on the land pretty soon. And as always, we we love it when you guys share your photos and stories with us of the wildlife that you encounter when you're out on our land or anywhere else in Dennis in your own yard. And we just love to see what's out there. There's a lot that we don't see because many mammals are active at night when we're cozy in our beds. And there's so much that is happening when people aren't around. You know, lots of mammals are shy of people and are apt to be less active when they're around. So that includes everything from coyotes to deer and weasels and shrews and on and on. So it's great to have places where, you know, animals can just be without people. We do have lots of properties where there is no real public access, and those are, you know, those areas important as kind of sanctuaries for our native animals.
Tyler,
Yeah.
just a couple of things. We live, you're kind of behind Ezra Baker Elementary School. And when we walk our dog at night on Center Street, it's not unusual for us at times, different times of the year, to see coyotes. They seem to do it consistently for a period of time, almost even traveling like a similar route. I don't know if they have like an area or a route that they regularly will take for a period of time. And then we've seen deer in our yard as well. But I walk to work sometimes in South Yarmouth, and just before going over the Bass River Bridge on the south side of 28, I think I've seen it's a dead mammal. I think it could be a fisher. I mean, I was so struck by the creature, and it's bigger than a house cat. It's smaller than a fox, more cat-like, weaselly-like. So I went on the internet and looked, and I'm pretty sure that's where it is. You mentioned a opossum that you saw on the side of the road that was injured, and there's a question about what do you do if you see an injured animal? It seems like a magnificent animal. And to be honest with you, I hate that it's just sitting on the side of the road dead. If the ground wasn't so hard, I mean, maybe that's the thing to do. I mean, to bury it somewhere, it just doesn't seem appropriate. I don't know your thoughts about that at all, or move it onto a blanket and put it out in the woods somewhere. I mean, it's still, it's been probably about, I don't know, a few weeks.
Yeah. Well, that's unfortunate that it was obviously struck by a car.
Yeah.
It seems to me, although it could be a fisher, it's probably more likely a river otter.
Is that right?
There are definitely river otters in the Bass River. There's actually river otters, even found in forested wetlands. They travel pretty long distances looking for food.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That would make sense.
Yeah, it's possible. We do have fishers around. You just more often find fishers in wooded areas. Interestingly enough, I've seen coyotes walking down Route 28 at night in West Dennis. So it seems like they're pretty comfortable in that area. There's obviously lots of rabbits and squirrels for them to eat. And coyotes do definitely travel the same routes all the time. They're very efficient animals. They really know where to find food. And if they're traveling up and down the roads, it's because they're finding dead animals on them, probably like you just saw. A good reason to move a road-killed animal is for precisely that reason, because roadkill does attract animals like raccoons and coyotes that are opportunistic and that feed on carrion. And when animals learn that food is along the road, it of course puts them at risk from also being hit by a car. So, it's because it's a state highway that I think the state is the one who's supposed to move these animals off the road. And, you know, there aren't a lot of people who really do that. So that's probably why it's been sitting there for a long time.
Yeah.
At this point, the carcass is probably too far gone for you to really move it. I'm sure it's full of probably maggots and significantly decayed. Certainly not something that you want to put in your car. When I was in college, I had an opportunity to prepare a study skin as part of our mammalogy class. And so I had a woodchuck that had been hit by a car in front of our house. And it had maybe only been there for a day. And I brought it to the lab to work on it, and the whole insides were all putrefied already. So, I mean, that was in warm weather, but it's amazing how fast they start to decay.
You're right. Yeah.
It's pretty rapid.
I have a question, Kyla.
Yeah.
I hear that, I don't know if it's true. If coyotes are a certain area, that means foxes are not. Do they not cross their paths anywhere? If, like, we've seen not lately, but a beautiful red fox.
Mhm.
We haven't seen one for quite a while. I mean, we get coyotes through here a lot. So, but do they not like to stay in each other's territory, or how do they stay away from each other all the time?
That's true. Foxes stay away from coyotes. Probably because they're competing for similar resources. And, you know, the coyote is a larger and more powerful animal that can probably kill a red fox. So they apparently don't coexist very well. We do know that they're sort of uncommon around Cape Cod, but we have gray foxes here too. And they're excellent climbers. They're a little bit cat-like in their habits.
Yeah.
So they're probably fine in terms of coexisting with coyotes. They're not necessarily competing for quite the same resources because they're climbing trees after chipmunks and squirrels, and they sleep up in trees also. A red fox is a good climber, but they spend more time on the ground.
Yeah, just at this we haven't seen the red fox for a while, but our neighbors a couple streets up had seen, must have been the same one. This was a little while ago, but it was just like beautiful. I mean, it wasn't mangy at all. It was just gorgeous, beautiful one. I'll tell you, we haven't seen one for a long time. It was nice to see one like that, you know?
Yeah, it is nice to see. They're beautiful animals. Anything else folks would like to share before we end today?
All set.
Okay, well, thanks for joining me this morning. I hope it was interesting and you learned something new. I know I did when I was doing a little bit of research for this presentation. It was really cool to see that photo of all the coyotes together. It's not something I've seen before, coyotes in a pack like that, but you know, when there's good food resources, seems like they are more social. So stay tuned for some more trainings coming up, and hopefully some in-person land stewardship on our properties in the not too distant future. In the meantime, I hope you all stay healthy and well, and find occasion to get outside and enjoy some of this warmer weather we're having this weekend.
Thank you very much, Tyler.
Thank you,
Tyler.
Kyla.
Stay in touch, and I will too. Take care.
Okay, yeah, bye-bye.
See ya.